Captain to bridge.
Spock here.
Any signs of life?
Negative.
Have you tried all hailing frequencies?
Affirmative. No answer from the queue.
Allow me to introduce myself. I am Doctor Who, and this is my time and space machine. TARDIS. Off we go. It is capable of taking us to any age, on any planet, in any universe. This is the year 2150.
Look!
Daleks are the masters of Earth. Exterminate!
We must find out their weakness.
We'll show them who the masters are.
Nothing can stop us now!
Hey guys, what's going on? You are listening to Future Imperfect, only on ThisWeekInGeek.net. And we're doing something special today. Say we're celebrating an anniversary, but I'm not alone. I am joined by, well, I'm probably not going to call myself the Doctor in this one. I'm definitely a companion. Let's be honest, I'm probably the tin dog in all this. I'm joined by my co-host, my brother from the lovely city of Kitchener.
Alex, the producer here.
And from the faraway land of Lansing, Michigan, co-host, good friend, friendo.
Oh, I'm Aaron Pollyea, and with
I'm
me,
Darlene.
yeah, Darlene's
And
here.
Darlene. So yes, guys, we are going to be talking about Doctor Who tonight on Future Imperfect. Now, we're not going to be talking about the traditional Doctor Who series that started during the 1960s, 1963, if I'm not mistaken, because today, as of this recording, is the anniversary of Doctor Who, but we're not going to be talking about the television series. And you're going to be thinking, well, what the hell are you going to be talking about? Well, it turns out, once upon a time, there were feature films that were made about these characters, and the guy who played the Doctor was Grand Moff Tarkin, aka Peter Cushing, who I recently just saw in some of the Hammer horror movies that me and James Rolfe talked about with Enrique Couto back on our Halloween special a couple of weeks back. And Aaron and Alex had pitched this to me, and I'm really glad I got down to watch these. So I'm just going to start with my history with these movies because it comes from a very surprising place with me. So turns out I knew about these movies in the 1990s in a very, very strange way. A friend of mine shoplifted a magazine from a newsstand in the 1990s, and it was about British television shows and movies. And I remember there was a huge article in this magazine about Thunderbirds, which is why he stole it. But further back in that magazine,
what an odd thing to nick from a store.
Yeah, well,
like what kind of kids in the 90s? Let's steal British television show magazines.
I was going to say, Alex, you and I both know this person, and you're going to be saying this doesn't surprise me when you probably already know who this person is. And it's so strange because it turns out there was I think a documentary or something called Dalek Mania.
Yeah.
And there was a huge section of this magazine dedicated towards it. And I'd never heard of a Dalek before. I'd never seen this type of a robotic design for a bad guy. Because for me, most robots were Terminators, or they were like Johnny Five, or they were droids from Star Wars, right? I'd never seen a Dalek before. I'd never even heard the word before. So reading this magazine, there were all these stills from the two Doctor Who movies, which was Doctor Who and the Daleks, and then Doctor Who Invasion of Earth 2150. And I was like, okay, this is incredibly weird and strange, but I kind of want to know more about this. And then Doctor Who faded from my consciousness till probably about, I want to say 2008, 2009, when I first got into Doctor Who, when the revival series had already been going for several years. and I first got into the Christopher Eccleston, the Ninth Doctor, who's honestly my favorite Doctor. And I just kind of forgot about these movies until you and Alex pitched the show to me. So that is my very bizarre introduction to Doctor Who. It started from a random act of thievery.
Okay.
So that
Well, I
being
mean,
said,
Alex, do you want to go next? Because I think
Yeah.
Darlene and I would have more of a history with Doctor
Oh,
Who
yeah.
than
Sure,
than you.
absolutely. I'm the baby of the bunch. So growing up, Doctor Who went off the air when I was like 3, the initial run, right? So my only experience growing up seeing it was there were reruns that ran like, unlike in the States, I think, wasn't it PBS that showed Doctor Who or something back in
Yeah,
the days for you
PBS
guys?
generally did.
Ye-
Yep.
Yeah, for us, it aired on 2 different channels, and you didn't need like cable or anything. The CBC, our national broadcaster, aired it in its first run, and occasionally they would have some reruns. But it aired for like 20 years in reruns on TVO, which is TV Ontario. It's like PBS, but provincially run, so everybody can pick it up. It doesn't matter. You could be out in the boonies, and if you have bunny ears, you can pick it up. So it was always sort of on. So as a kid, I'd see it, and I was like, okay, you just have it on the background, flipping around whenever between kids channel stuff. And so I, in going back and watching some of the other Doctor Who stuff, especially the recent, what was it, the Tales of the TARDIS that we watched.
Yeah.
Seeing that, I was like, I watched all 6 of those episodes where they took classic Doctor stories from all throughout and updated them with bookends with either the Doctors that are still alive or with the companions that are still alive. I went, wait a minute. I was having like fever dreams. I was like, I've seen this before, or parts of it before. I'm like, oh yeah, from when I was really little, and it was just sort of on. And as far as these movies go, the only Doctor Who movie I knew of until probably 10,
Yeah.
10, 15 years ago was the Fox TV movie.
Yeah. With Paul McGann.
Yeah, with Paul McGann and what's his name there?
Sylvester McCoy.
Yeah, Sylvester McCoy was the Doctor right when he regenerated, but yeah.
Yeah, and Eric Roberts played the Master in that one.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing that was that's mostly what I remembered of Doctor Who until because I was like 10 or something when that came on. And of course, on Fox, it was like Fox was the destination station at the time for sci-fi, right? You watched X-Files and Sliders. And all that sort of stuff. And like Adventures of Briscoe County Jr., that sort of stuff. So we were just used to seeing that on Fox. We're like, oh, this is a cool movie, not really knowing that it was attached to anything necessarily. And then when I was working retail, right when I believe between series or season 2 or 3 of the revival series, everybody at work was talking about it because it became a pretty big hit here because it was airing, I think, on the CBC for the first 2 or 3 seasons, and then it went to space up here on one of our version of the Sci-Fi Channel, and it became like the hip new thing. And like the DVDs were flying off the shelf at work, where like we're talking every shift I was working, there was somebody buying a copy of Doctor Who seasons 1 or 2. So I went, okay, I'll pick it up. I'll use my staff discount and watch. And I watched the Christopher Eccleston stuff, and I was like, wait a minute, this is fine, but it felt it still felt very British to me, and I wasn't a fan of anything that wasn't like super high quality at the time as far as perceptually, special effects. Now I'm much more open to everything, right? But at the time I was like, what? And I'm like, well, what's this? And my friend said, no, you got to watch the second season with the other Doctor. And I was like, what other Doctor? And that sent me down the rabbit hole of, oh, this is how this all works with regeneration and everything, yada, yada, yada. And I remember vaguely looking up online that, wait a minute, there were movies back in the 60s. Mm-hmm. And I just never got around to watching them. I'd heard about them, and I don't believe there was, like, at the time, a home video release in North America. There might have been bootleg VHS tapes and that, but I don't remember ever seeing them put on video. And they probably aired at some point on television. I would imagine, Michael, like probably TVO's Saturday Night at the Movies or something would have shown it, right?
Yeah, like this definitely seems like an Elwee Yost sort of thing. And I would wonder if Rick Green, who used to do Prisoners of Gravity, which was another groundbreaking TVO show at the time, which is like up here in Canada, we used to have a thing called the Space Channel. We still kind of do, but now it's called the CTV Sci-Fi. And they used to have a show called Inner Space, but there was a show that precursored that called Prisoners of Gravity, which used to feature interviews with a lot of Doctor Who people. You'd see authors like Neil kind of Gaiman, and it really wouldn't surprise me if there was a crossover somewhere with TVO personalities covering these two movies. I mean, how could you not, honestly?
Yeah, it's the kind of stuff that they used to produce a lot of that kind of local programming where think like Dinner and a Movie and that where they sometimes would splice in programs between movie showings. So it might be something like that. So I'm assuming so, but it hit, I think it hit Blu-ray and streaming only in the last 10 years or so. So
I actually had to run into my collection and I pulled out a box set. Darlene and I have a box set that's on DVD of these movies and the Dalek Mania documentary that was made in 2001.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so it was either a small print run or it was not common, I know, to see it, but then now it's widely available, both of these films. And I went, you know what? Let's check it out. Like, why not? The anniversary is coming up, or as of this, release of this episode, it'll be happening of the 60th anniversary. And I went, these are ones we've never seen. It's not like we have to watch a ton of stuff to keep up or analyze it. And I went, you know what? It's the 60s one. It's in Technicolor. This is way before we had color episodes of the show. I'd assume it would be bigger budget. This should be fun. So that was sort of why I sent it over and said, hey guys, let's watch this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad you did, actually.
So Darlene and I have actually covered these two movies on Earth versus Soup. And I pitched these two movies to you guys because I thought that they were really interesting in a 1960s. I'm sorry for my computer beeping.
It's all part of the TARDIS making sound effects in the background. It's all good.
Just freaking out. They're weird movies in this 1960s way, but they're different enough from the TV show of Doctor Who that they're their own thing. They're still Doctor Who.
Yeah, but it's Doctor Who.
Yeah,
his last name is Who.
Yeah,
where
in the show,
he's only the Doctor.
The Doctor, and he doesn't have a last name.
Title.
Yeah,
it's like the Master,
the Ronnie,
the
meddling monk.
They don't
or Cher, Prince, or Cher.
Well, it's more of like Time Lords tend to take titles rather than names.
Concepts.
Yeah, concepts, because their names are too complex. At least that's from the show, okay? But in the movie, in these movies, the Peter Cushing movies, he's Doctor Who. But yeah, we covered these in Earth versus Soup, and it's because, well, they're from the 1960s, they're science fiction, and Darlene and I both absolutely adore Doctor Who, the TV show, the old one. And the new one, and the new stuff too. But we were both giant fans of the old series. We kind of like, on our early dates before we got married and we just started dating, we started watching old episodes of Doctor Who together because it turned out that we both loved it, and that was a weird thing for two people to like. I don't know.
Yeah, they have Ian and Barbara and Susan in this.
Oh, and
that's the
those are the original
companions to the first Doctor.
Yeah, played by William Hartnell. Susan is his granddaughter, and she is in this movie as well, his granddaughter. And at least in the TV show, she's a little bit older. She's actually in her teens. And she's clearly not from Earth and not from this time period, because she often talks about things that are anachronistic. She's confused about money in the TV show because at the time they started filming, they were not on the decimal currency system. They were still using the weird like shillings and all that. And she was confused because she thought that Britain had gone to decimal already. And it was really funny gags like that. But in the movie here, the interplay between Peter Cushing and Roberta Tove, who plays Susan, is a joy. And it turns out that those two actors loved each other on set, and they played off each other. And it's a little weird when you watch a lot of Peter Cushing movies, because Peter Cushing tends to play the serious dude in these horror movies, sometimes an intense villain like Grand Moff Tarkin. But again, if you know enough about Peter Cushing, he's this really loving man who is very protective of the people around him, and he truly cared about this young actress, Roberta Tove, to the extent that he refused to do Dalek Invasion of Earth 2150 unless she came back.
Oh,
wow.
that's interesting.
That's intense. That's cool.
And you're right, because usually when you see him, he's never happy in any role he's
No.
in, right? He's always so stoic or serious or intense. And seeing him here, I had to almost do a double take. I'm like, is this really him? Like, I know he's got the makeup on and it's him clearly, but I was like, he was playing like one of the grandpa characters on like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so
also that
weird to see him so
mustache.
wholesome.
Yeah, it's the mustache. But yeah,
It's also the mustache. Ugh.
Yeah.
but yeah, he's wholesome because he's the Doctor. Well, Doctor Who in this. And at the point of the first movie was made in 1965. So Doctor Who, the television show, had already been around for at least a couple seasons, right? And by that point, the BBC understood that the Doctor was beloved by children. It was a very, very well-regarded children's show already at this point. And Peter Cushing took that to heart, just like William Hartnell did, who was the actor who played on television, and really tried to engage children and made sure that they always felt safe watching the show, even if it was scary. And Peter Cushing plays that off really well. And it's why a lot of kids grew up watching these, frankly, pretty terrifying TV shows for the time, and feeling safe because they saw the blue box of the TARDIS and they knew that the Doctor would be there to help. And Peter Cushing and William Hartnell both really pulled that off.
And it helps
One
that
of the
back
things-
then it was it's the grandpa, like even if it wasn't playing a grandpa in the show itself, he's a grandfatherly character. So unless he's going to be really evil, sinister, generally kids are going to think that they're safe around a grandpa anyway.
Yes.
There was
and
something.
I mean, yeah. Go ahead.
There was something that I kind of had this thought while I was watching it, like to think back to a lot of the popular culture at the time. You think back to North American culture, like specifically, you had a lot of Silver Age superheroes. You had your Batman, your Superman, your Avengers, your Captain Americas, your stuff like that. Doctor Who, to me, felt like a more relatable heroic icon that a kid could really get into, because as you guys are saying, it was so beloved by children. You both touched on the fact that it was that grandfatherly paternal role. You can relate to that. You can relate more to the Doctor than frigging Batman or Superman. And I think that's very interesting. Just the fact that I think a lot of kids, or at least in my opinion, have, I don't know, I would say a better understanding of the pop culture that was surrounding them at the time. Like, I don't know, I just think British kids had an edge over North American audiences, because like you were saying, Aaron, these stories were in some cases really scary and terrifying, but it was also hard sci-fi at times, dealing with some pretty weird kind of concepts, whereas Batman fights the Joker with crazy purple knockout gas, and it's just, I don't know. There's just something I find, I don't know. On one level, I'm kind of jealous that kids got something a little smarter than what we were used to over here. I guess I'd call it junky pop culture over here, whereas over there, it just seemed like it was a little bit more refined. Maybe I'm romanticizing it a touch, but that's just how it comes across to me.
Well, it predates Star Trek by a couple of years, right? So
yeah.
Well, yeah, by a few years. This movie would have been coming. The first movie came out at about the time Roddenberry was putting together the first bits of Star Trek, like writing The Cage and Jeffries doing the actual design of Enterprise and things like that. But those are two very different you know, Star Trek stands out, Doctor Who stands out, and it's because there was a lot of thought put into it. That's not to say that Doctor Who, and in specifically even these two movies, don't have goofy things in them, because they do.
Oh yeah.
But let's be fair, when you're talking about Doctor Who and the Daleks, you're talking about fascist robots that are all about ethnic cleansing, that have destroyed their world via nuclear weapons and chemical weapons.
To kill off their
To kill everything off that isn't like them. But the ones that are left are the blonde, blue-haired Thals.
the thoughts.
So it's that twist on the whole fascist Aryan crap. But like the Daleks are these little blobs of mutated Khaled that are just sitting inside the travel pods.
They are the perfect race, and you're like, ew.
Well,
So I mean, but all that kind of like fight against fascism and the dangers of fascism was much more present in the UK compared to the US.
Exactly.
Well,
I
they were
was just
closer
gonna,
to it.
yeah, I was just going to say the big difference here, especially for children, if you're the target audience for this movie in 1965 is likely 10-year-olds. Somewhere between 10 and 15 is where I could see this being the target. And you look at that, these are kids that have now grown up in the post-war, but it's still it's only been 20 years since the war ended. So the series, when it started, the war hadn't ended, it was only 18 years or so after the war ended. It's still in people's
Very fresh.
minds. And they also, they're dealing with very low budgets on their television show. Decent enough budget for a British movie at the time for the
Oh
first
yeah, no,
movie
this
here.
had a great budget. Yeah.
180,000, adjust that for inflation, yada yada. But if you look at other movies of the time period, a lot of British TV shows were being filmed for 5,000 or 10,000 British pounds an episode, which you convert, to US dollars. It was like 20 grand an episode for a TV show there in black and white. Whereas it was easily, even back then, 10, 15 times that cost for an American show. So they were dealing with low budgets. They were dealing with a world that they knew around them that had been ravaged for, let's be real, they had barely rebuilt after World War I before World War II happened. And and then it's just like, it had been almost, at that point, 50 years of just hell in Europe. So it kind of lent themselves to making darker stories than we would be used to over here, right? Our stories our sci-fi stories and fantasy stories were of heroism and everything's happy-go-lucky, Buck Rogers and all this sort of stuff. And then over there, it's just like, well, I can look outside and I can see the rubble of where the tanks were, or the constant reminder of what happened, to people in World War II. And like you said, they put a twist on that with this movie, and it's pretty clear to to us, and it would have been clear enough to any adults watching back then what it was. But it was an interesting way to show it to the kids, and I loved the fact that it's Technicolor. It's there's that certain look of '60s color movies.
It's very vivid, right?
Very, very saturated. Very stark paintings of the matte paintings and everything look great. Just something about the way the sets were cheap, but they maximized what they could do with them. That is always interesting to me. And I made a comment to Mike. I'm not sure if I did it in the group chat, but I said, to me, this feels like the American Batman TV show.
Yeah, and
just without the boof pow, all that sort of, but it's the same like set and aesthetics, not the Dutch angle shots like where everything's turned to the side, but it's just the costumes. I was like, how I pitched it to Mike when I was like, hey, before you watch, here's what you should know about it. It's very different than the show, than what just in terms of lots of things. But I said, it's what if you mashed Doctor Who with 60s Batman, and then took the hippie aliens from that episode of Star Trek, the one where they play the lute or whatever. I forget.
Those are the Khaled. No, I mean those are the Thals. Yeah, in this. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, and you mix them and you just mash them up together, and you get the Doctor Who movie, the first one.
Yeah, like honestly, I found both of these movies to be such a joy to watch. And another thing too, because normally when you get a kid sidekick in a movie, they're either overly enthusiastic or annoying. I didn't find Susan to be annoying. I found her to be remarkably competent. And it just seems to me like when you make a movie during the 1960s or 70s, your sidekicks are very over the top, annoying children. Here, it wasn't that. And to go along with Alex's thing where it feels like the 1960s Batman sort of thing, this had such a fun and chill vibe to it that I found this to be such an easy watch. And I'm only starting now to watch movies from the 50s and 60s and 70s. And I'm noticing it is such a very different way to watch a movie as compared to the modern stuff. Like most of my movie watching honestly comes from the 80s and 90s, which is a fault on my behalf, but I'm learning to appreciate different eras of film now. And honestly, I think I could handle more 60s sci-fi if it felt like this. I had such a good time watching this one. Now, admittedly, I liked the second one a hell of a lot more, but probably not for a reason that you may not necessarily expect from me. This one of the things I loved how the Dalek design has stayed fairly consistent from the beginning, but I think I read a couple articles before we came into this show, just how when the Daleks got designed for the big screen, they got a little bit of a change to them. And I was watching the Children in Need special, which aired earlier this week, I think. And they were talking how the Daleks got their manipulator claw, but when the Doctor crashed the TARDIS, he knocked it off and they got a plunger, and Davros is like, I like this better. But in the original first movie here, they have the manipulator claw. And I was just, I like how they tied all that together despite everything. The Dalek design has always stayed pretty consistent, and even when they do change it, because in the Matt Smith run, which you didn't see, Alex, they do have the different colors of the Daleks, which represent different ranks, like the Scientist Dalek, the Supreme Dalek, the Command Dalek, the Commando one, and they kept colors here, and I was like, I did not expect that from the 1960s one. I thought that was a fairly new concept during the Matt Smith run. So this blew my mind seeing that.
I want to make a point out that you might want to look at is British children's acting. I always feel is not the cutesy. They're actually people in
Agreed.
the older movies.
Yeah, a lot of the movies that we've watched for Earth versus Soup that are British horror or sci-fi from this era, the child actors are remarkably good. And Roberta Tovey, who plays Susan, like I said, Peter Cushing was taken by her because she was actually a very good actress for her age, a very good actress. And she didn't really do a whole bunch after this. But as I said, Peter Cushing refused to do the second movie.
I think that's the
Unless
difference
she was
between
there.
British and American
Child
actors. Probably stems from Shirley Temple.
I don't know, they're just being cutesy as kids here in the U.S. versus
Cutesy or the cardinal sin for
Overly
me-
sweet.
Well, no, the cardinal sin for me is when they take in American and Canadian productions is when they take a child actor and then give them adult lines. The perpetual kid genius who knows everything more than everybody else. That usually grinds my gears. And interestingly enough, the British stuff, they'll do something similar, but it's never quite as over the top. I find that our productions tend to have the children almost doing like Disney Channel pantomiming, way over the top, overacting on everything.
Yeah,
and the British stuff is more subtle.
Susan in this is, smarter than a lot of people, but it makes sense why she is, but she doesn't rub it into other people.
No,
She's very clever.
She's just very clever. I think it's the beginning of the second movie where she's reading like a textbook on like quantum physics or something like that, and then Barbara's reading some sort of like basic book.
Science of Science or something.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess the plot point wise, we don't need to go too deep into it because it's fairly simple, right? We're introduced to the Doctor. And it's quite apparent from the beginning that this is different than the Doctor in the show. He's not an alien. He's just like a Albert Einstein mad scientist, but for the good of science.
Yeah.
Who has a scientifically minded family, and we get a companion in this that is not science minded. In this first one's the one with the boyfriend, correct? Yeah.
Well,
Ian,
it's
right?
Ian, yeah, Ian and Barbara, and in the TV show, Ian and Barbara are both teachers at the school that Susan's going to.
Oh, okay. So that's what I was wondering. Is I'm assuming you both know the differences between the original was it a season 1 plot or a season 2 plot of the
Well,
show?
Ian and Barbara are companions through the first 2 seasons
With Susan.
Okay.
with Susan. Susan's around for a little. Actually, I think Ian and Barbara are for 3 seasons. Susan's like through 2 because she leaves at the end of Dalek Invasion of Earth 2150 in the TV show. So Susan,
Okay.
and this leads into new Doctor Who. What happened to Susan during the Time War because she was left on Earth in 2150? Like, no,
Oh.
Susan might still be
Oh.
around.
Well,
Yeah.
and the actress that plays her 70. She could still come back and do something.
It's possible.
Or at least
Anyway, yeah, we
Susan
know all the
in
differences.
this
Yeah.
movie. Yeah, I was going to say. So, is it majorly different than what happened in the show?
Yes, a lot, very much different. Once they get to Skaro, it isn't so different. That's fairly similar, but the characters are different. Ian and Barbara and Susan are all very different in this, but the basic plot is fairly similar. It's just that it leads into the plot via the first episode of Doctor Who, because the first movie here is based on the second story of Doctor Who. The first story's Unearthly Child, which they go back to like 1 million BC or something like that, and that's where Ian and Barbara learn about the Doctor and Susan and time travel and all that. Then in story 2, they go forward to Skaro, and they see the devastation on Skaro. So Ian and Barbara are both humans that are just kind of like fish out of water, especially on this alien planet, but they're intelligent. Darlene, do you want to?
If you want to know more about the dialects, I would actually watch a Tom Baker episode of the
Genesis of the Daleks?
Genesis of the Dialects.
Okay.
Yeah, it's from the 1970s, and it actually tells the story of it's the story that actually introduces Davros, and it shows like why the Daleks were made. So it actually takes place before the events of Doctor Who and the Daleks, but also on Skaro. It's just that Skaro isn't as screwed up as it is here.
Okay.
The war is still going on.
Basically, the timey-wimey stuff that happened in this, the basic plot points are: you meet the companion, they check out the TARDIS, look how wacky it is, it's bigger on the inside. Accidental happenstance, they end up traveling, not just through time, but they travel through space and land on a planet that appears to have some life. And they encounter both the Daleks and what were the names of the Thals?
They're the Thals.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
The Thals. The Thals decide that they're going to try to help them because there's radiation on the planet. Dun dun dun! Radiation story. We know where this is going. There's some sort of horrible war that happened or is still happening, and it becomes like an episode of Star Trek, where it's pitting one side of pacifists against the side of total control, fascist, crazy pseudo Nazis, right? Only this time they're inside of robotic trash cans.
Mm-hmm. Art Deco trash cans.
Art Deco trash cans who fire extinguishers at you, and it just kills you.
Oh man! And you see, the thing is, those special effects of the fire extinguishers, you think that looks lame? That's really cool. That was really cool.
No, if you've ever used a fire extinguisher, hopefully you haven't had to, but if you ever have, you know that stuff sprays out, it smells and covers everything. So I'm thinking, how many actors had to cough their brains out after being in this?
Or passed
Now,
out.
Yeah.
Now, I actually did a little bit of research on this because I love props and I love special effects. Now, originally, the Daleks were supposed to be those CO2 compressed air things that you see them shoot. That was supposed to be a flamethrower. That was determined to be too scary for kids. And I thought, okay, that's awesome.
They actually have the flamethrowing using Dalek in the second movie, though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well,
right.
And remember, this first movie, somewhere around 180,000 British pounds to produce. I don't know if they had the insurance money to cover setting their cast
crew on
members
fire.
Even back then.
But yeah,
the
like
Dalek, actors being in the Dalek canister, you have to sympathize with them because they are crouched in there.
Oh, good.
Oh,
good
yeah.
Lord. There's a local guy.
Yeah, I knew you were going to bring this up.
Well, the Kitchener and Waterloo Dalek guy. Okay, I was friends with the people that ran the video store downtown here, and this video rental store just closed this year. They were literally one of the last 4 or 5 in Canada, and they had like 20,000 movies. It was one of those like hole in the wall places where you could rent anything you could find. Well, they would always participate in local like fun fairs, and when they'd have like parades and events at the local parks and that, and they're friends with a guy who had made a couple of like screen ready Dalek prop suits, cosplay suits, like out of wood, used the same materials and everything, and every year that they would show up and they would, driving around with a voice box, screaming exterminate and everything. Yeah. and like to the point where like I got to double check, but at one point the BBC had contacted him and one of his friends, who's another guy who made probably 2 of the only guys that ever made movie set prop ready Dalek suits in Canada. And I think they ended up using them for some of the stuff when the CBC and BBC America had some episodes filmed, stateside. I think they used some of the props because it was cheaper to borrow their stuff than it was to make new stuff for the show, only to use once or to have to ship stuff over. So I know that it's been used in some stuff before, and we're talking like prop ready. It's the point where like I got to touch the suit, see it. It's the dude is like, you're sitting so cramped and it's so hot, like every like 20 minutes he has to pop the head off and he's like, I need air. And they had to, like,
and at least on the TV show they had to hire dancers to do it because they had to be really quick on their feet to move around in it.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, small dancers. I mean, yeah. Anyway,
I mean, at least there's that, and then you think of obviously where George Lucas went with R2D2. Like, where do you think that came from? Obviously, right?
Yeah.
And it's like he went the different route of just hiring a person that fit within it and didn't have to contort themselves and be able to move around. But it's like you can see the influence of the Daleks on future sci-fi. Like, has there ever been two iconic characters that influence sci-fi as much as Robbie the Robot and the Daleks? I can't think of any that are that inspirational to like science fiction worldwide.
Yeah, it changed design of things for sure, but I think Doctor Who in general did that.
Yeah,
you can see Doctor Who in general rippling through sci-fi in a lot of different ways. But anyway, yeah, I would say that the second movie, if we want to talk about the second movie a little bit, is
better.
probably a little scarier and more realistic to kids because it takes place on Earth after the Daleks invade, and they've basically killed off most of the human race, but they're filming it around in places that look like London, and it looks like post-war London.
Yeah.
So it's all bombed out, and if you watch, there's actual like posters on the wall for like ads that are like 1940s and 50s ads. So it even has this weird post-war like wreckage quality to everything that's really, I don't know, as a person that looks at, post-war bombed out stuff from the UK, old film like that, it is purposely trying to give that feel that yeah.
It's double the budget too, and it shows in the matte paintings and the
Oh, yeah.
shots. And I'll be honest, one of the best looking like saucer ship models that I've seen from that era, right? Like if we're thinking pre Star Trek, pre 2001, this is one of the best looking alien ship, like as far as how it looked on film. I was like, geez, this had a budget to it, and I'm like, 290,000. I'm like, that doesn't seem like a lot, but then you consider like it was rare to have that kind of a budget on a European film at the time. This was as cheap as it is maybe for us today. This was pretty prestigious. Doubling your budget from your first film, the art department went wild here. You could tell.
Yeah,
one of the things.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was about to say one of the things that blew me away about the second movie, and I noticed it almost immediately, and this is what kept me engaged the entire movie. The soundtrack to this is so catchy. Like, I'm not a guy who would go out and buy vinyl, but I have a feeling if I could find a vinyl recording of this soundtrack, it would sound mind-blowingly good. Like there's just something about way like it's electronic-y, it's kind of hippie 1960s, but just it feels this retro futuristic sound. Like it gets in you and it doesn't want to leave. And it felt like another character in the movie. And whenever the soundtrack was cranked up and the action was like kind of happening, like when they're fighting the Robo Men, or when they're attacking the Dalek spaceship, when the Doctor and the Constable have been captured and it gets all action boppy kind of there. Like, I don't know. It sticks with you. Like, I really wish I had other words in my vocabulary to describe how much I loved the sound in this. Like, my God.
Very quickly, the look and feel of this to me when I was watching it, the first thing that popped into my head was, this is like the final battle, but 20 years earlier.
Yeah.
Just the look and feel of like the invaders are here, it's almost like we're thrown into the middle of it. We didn't see what happened to get us here, but we're like right in the midst of it. And I liked that it was more expansive. Some of the stunts in this, the stunt where the man is like trying to run away and he's like shot down from the blown out building, and lands. I rewound that 2 or 3 times and I went, that guy broke something. Like there's no safety net, and he fell funny. It didn't look right. I'm like, it's not a dummy. I'm going, what is this guy fell? Something happened here. Somebody's collecting some sort of medical insurance pension on this, because that did not look good.
Mike, you might want to check out some of the Doctor Who television series soundtracks from like the 70s and 80s if you like the music from this. You can find them. Like, I have a whole bunch hiding somewhere in the house because obviously I do. I'm a Doctor Who fan, but a lot of them can be pretty catchy.
Yeah, like when I started to watch older Doctor Who, once I started getting into the newer series, I found myself very drawn to the third Doctor stuff. I think the first, I'm trying to remember what the first,
that's
first
Darlene's favorite.
Oh, Darlene, you and I are spirit animals. Like, I dig that guy so much. Like, that cape, Doctor Who card.
The third Doctor is John Pertwee. He's the first actor that played the Doctor that I ever met. But cool. He is Darlene's favorite Doctor, and he's my second favorite Doctor, and that's including the new series. Okay,
he's in my top 5.
He's my second favorite. My first favorite is Sylvester McCoy, the 7th Doctor, because I love every episode by him. But yeah, John Pertwee, because their style and
his eyes.
Oh yeah, John Pertwee, and his eyebrows, how he can move his eyebrows. But you see, all the actors that play the Doctor, Peter Cushing included, have charisma.
It's this magnetic personality because they have to convey, I'm approachable, I want to help you. I'm smarter than you, but I'm humble about it. We're going to get through this together. I'm going to give you hope, but you're ultimately going to save yourself. And that's what I think Doctor Who does well.
Some can be more snarky than others, obviously.
Yeah. Capaldi, I'm looking at you.
He's great, yeah. And William Hartnell is like
the
first Doctor. He can be really off-putting at times, but that's kind of the point. Like, when the Doctor suddenly gets dark and it gives you the look, you know that, like, he's going to wreck it. Like, that's just the way it's going to be. Because he sees something evil and he's going to deal with it. And even, John Pertwee does the same thing. More rarely, because John Pertwee's The Third Doctor is much more light than a lot.
He's also stuck on Earth.
Yeah, so he's having to deal with stranger, I guess more easy situations to him. They might not be easy situations to Unit or the human characters around him, but it feels like, he even says, like, most of this stuff is below me. This is all stuff that you humans can take care of, But that's like the only time he gets a little tetchy about it because he's stuck on Earth. But anyway, sorry.
Well, and in looking at the other Doctors, like for the ones that came back for the specials, the TARDIS specials, I guess Tom Baker's the only one that didn't, but I'm assuming he didn't because he's like,
he's very, very old. They just released the BBC just released a picture of him in his costume today, in fact. And
because I think he's 90 or 91 or something, and he came back for, what was it, one of the last specials they did? Well, not last specials, one of the I think it was the big one with David Tennant.
Matt Smith. He played the curator.
Oh, that's it. He wasn't technically the Doctor, or was he?
He was, but yeah, he just called himself the curator, is all.
Yeah, and I mean, but the others that came back was interesting to see, because, like, I know this is a discussion of the two movies, but it's also a discussion on, like, the 60th anniversary and everything tied into it, right? It was interesting to me to see, Peter Davison come back, as well as Colin Baker and Sylvester McCoy. What surprised me was, I figured most of these Doctors were probably all around like 90 years old. I didn't realize that Peter Davison was so young when he played the Doctor compared to the other actors at the time.
His daughter married David Tennant.
Oh,
yeah, so it's a family.
Yeah,
cool,
She was on an episode of the new series too, as the Doctor's daughter. She was the one that got cloned off David Tennant. That's where they met.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
And they got married. And I just sent you the picture of Tom Baker. I know that's in our private chat, but I'm really happy that Sylvester McCoy came back for those for one of those specials. With Sophie Aldred as Ace. We got to see some of the old Doctor stuff. I would have loved to see, honestly, as the 60th anniversary, I would love to see some of the people from these movies. And the upside is that we will see one person from these movies in the specials that are coming out, and that's Bernard Cribbins. Because Bernard Cribbins was in the second movie, Dalek Invasion of Earth 2150. He was Tom. And he plays Wilf, who's Donna's grandfather, in the new series. And he will be there for these specials. Because he only died recently, but he filmed some stuff for these specials before he did.
Because it's interesting how they kept bringing people. It is almost like when we think of Star Trek bringing in people over multiple generations and shows for guest spots and stuff. This is like the British version, obviously, where they always bring people back. They always find ways to incorporate them. They'll write interesting tidbits into stories, weave them in. And this movie 2150, I could almost see this one being remade again.
It could be.
I feel like the previous one is more of a relic of the 60s that doesn't really fit in today's stories necessarily. You'd have to do a lot of tweaking to it to make it fit into the modern way of storytelling. There's not a ton you'd have to do to Dalek Invasion Earth 2150 for it to even be pretty relevant to, like, things that are going on in the world today even. Interestingly, with the plot here, it's, they're sent to the future. They get involved in a resistance movement against the invaders, and they find out that the Daleks are planning to they're not just planning to overthrow us, they're planning to alter the Earth's core so that we can. Are they going to move the planet somewhere? Is that what it was going to
be? I think the idea is they're going to be like a spaceship or something. Yeah,
they're going to. Yeah,
which actually, there was something that I read about this like a while ago, and it's going to sound weird. And since Aaron, I know you've got a pretty solid background in science. I remember there was an article that was saying, what if Earth was knocked out of its orbit, and what if it became a rogue planet floating through the cosmos doing its own thing? How long would the planet survive? And I got to thinking, because I know this has been a theory that's been floating around in the scientific community for decades at this point. And if Doctor Who just kind of did this on kind of a whim, that's really forward thinking, because Earth wouldn't immediately die if that were to happen. Now, plant life and eventually things would eventually freeze over. But with the Daleks being a super advanced race, having a planet-sized spaceship, it's not a terrible idea. You'd have abundant resources and minerals and everything, plus the heat from the Earth's core and everything. I'm thinking that's kind of a clever idea, but then it all gets destroyed via magnets.
I mean, go ahead.
But the issue that we have with stuff like that is always that before you even get to Earth, you've got the asteroid belts, Jupiter, all that. If you've got the ability to do something like that to a planet, you don't even need to invade another planet.
You can just build whatever size spaceship you want. At that point, like, why not
Nevin rings?
Why not build Nevin rings or giant O'Neill cylinders or topologies? Not topologies. Topolis. They're like chains of O'Neill cylinders that can reach billions of miles long. But yeah, I mean, not that the Daleks would actually care about any of the life on Earth, but yeah, all life on Earth would die pretty quickly after it went up. And believe it or not, Doctor Who has already done that. It's called Mondus. It's where the Cybermen come from. In the original timeline, Mondus is actually a twin of Earth that orbited on the opposite side of the sun from us, and it fell out of orbit, and it actually started orbiting way outside Pluto, and everything died. And the Cybermen slowly started replacing their failing organs and things with cybernetics, and that's how the Cybermen were made. They basically just died. Everything died. It's pretty bleak.
Well, the only way I could see it working would be like, or the reason for them if they wanted to update it, like, why would they go through the bother of taking our planet? There would have to be something like, we have some rare element in Earth, like down in the core or something, that is not easily mined where they are, not easily found, and it's cheaper and more resource friendly to just steal the whole freaking planet.
I gotta say this.
That's
we
really
are all made of star matter.
Yeah, so everything on Earth is going to be found everywhere else. But I mean, that's
I know.
That's what we talk about on Earth versus Soup all the time, though, with alien invasion movies. There's only like a couple reasons, like legitimate reasons, for aliens to ever like invade.
I think we've said it on a episode.
At least one. Like, you literally believe that life on this planet is evil and needs to be wiped out because of religious reasons, not for resources or anything like that. Because whatever resources Earth has, you can get easier with less fuss elsewhere.
How about biodiversity of genetic material, because you've got some sort of strain of something that's killing off all life on your planet, but maybe taking our
then
DNA
why invade
or something?
You ask for it. You go, I need help. Can I have samples?
Yeah.
It'll result in less.
Girl from Mars.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm a pretty dominatrix. I need you.
Yeah.
I need you, man.
That's a clip right there.
Well, Well, hello, Julie Strain.
No, Devil Girl from Mars. The plot from Devil Girl from Mars is dying out because the women took over and bred their men too submissively, so they need to come to Earth and invade so they can get better genes. But the point is that you could literally just go on to television and go, "Hi, I'm Miss Dominatrix from Mars. I need men to have sex with us constantly on Mars to repopulate the planet. Can I have volunteers?" And there'd be men lining up.
And that goes the same way for the other way.
Death by snooze.
Death by snooze. But I mean,
Well,
it would go the other way too.
Well-
It would. There'd be women lining up for.
I mean, how many times have we seen in other nations where it says wife for?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, Mail
Exactly.
Order
So I mean,
Brides.
but we're getting away from Doctor Who because we're just babbling about random shit.
No, but getting into that, what you're saying there with the only few reasons to want to invade or attack or whatever, Michael, doesn't that make you think of Mass Effect and how they basically covered both in the original Mass Effect trilogy, the games? It's essentially about artificial life being afraid that organic life is going to
Destroy everything.
destroy itself and everything, and there will have been no reason for life to have lived.
Yeah, like
Their idea is preserve the history of organic life within a construct, and as like a museum piece, essentially a living museum piece of artificial intelligence. And they do a cycle every 50,000 years so that it gives new life the opportunity to grow to a certain point, and then they cull it. And then in what was going to be the next set of trilogy with Mass Effect Andromeda, where they're in the Andromeda galaxy, where they sleep for hundreds of years while they're in faster than light travel, wake up there, and their utopia that they think they're finding has been conquered by another alien race. There, in that one, the aliens that are conquering that part of the galaxy or that part of the universe are there simply because they've been genetically manipulating themselves and to become the perfect species, and they think of all other life as lesser to the point where they should just be destroyed because their religion says so.
Yeah, and that's basically what the Daleks think, is that all other life is slime and doesn't need to exist because there's only one true life form, and that's Daleks. Like,
Except that they're not a true life form.
yeah, they're kind of an engineered
They're
life form anyway.
engineered.
Yeah.
And there's even been times where the Daleks have even teamed up with other races, but even then the alliances are temporary. They've teamed up with the Cybermen on a couple of occasions. They inevitably stab each other in the back. They've teamed up with the Sontarans.
Did you end up
in
watching
all
that,
this.
that new special, Michael, the one that Power of the Doctor?
No, I haven't seen that one yet. I really need to.
Before the actual special new movies come, or new TV specials come out, I think the first one's this week. Actually,
should be tomorrow, maybe.
Yeah. Before that does, you should give it a watch because that's an hour and a half long. It's basically a TV movie, and it brings back people from a bunch of the previous Doctor's companions, as well as some other Doctor's appearances in some scenes. And within that, the part of the plot line is there is a Dalek defector.
Oh,
that decides to try to help, which that's a rarity in itself. And I'll say, Michael, it doesn't go well.
Oh, yeah, about as well as one might expect.
Precisely, and part of that plot line is eerily similar. Probably as a point to reference some of the past stories where they're part of the disasters in that episode or that special is they're using a drilling system that seems kind of similar to this one in the 1960s movie 2150 AD, where they're trying to drill down to affect volcanoes.
Yeah.
Which, watching both of these within a span of a week of each other, I was like, wait a minute. I see what you're doing here. You're taking some highlights of some of the previous stories and sort of putting a spin on them and putting them together in the new one. So that's why I think this holds up pretty well. Plot line in this movie is it's your standard resistance movie, figuring out sort of what happened, finding camaraderie amongst the the resistance movement, but also finding that there are traitors willing to sell you out for favor, which again doesn't work, doesn't help anybody, and certainly doesn't help the traitors.
I mean, one thing I've really liked about Doctor Who, as we start to wind down this conversation, I like how Doctor Who creates so many different and interesting villains. The Daleks are probably one of my favorite bad guys in sci-fi. Ultimately, I love their appearance. I like how single-minded of purpose they are, and how they will destroy you. I like how they've crossed over some of my other favorite sci-fi properties. There is a very interesting Star Trek versus Doctor Who thing where the Borg and the Cybermen and the Daleks all fight, if I remember that right.
That comic book, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty kind of kick-ass. And it's really neat just to see what they do. And again, there are bad guys in Doctor Who. Like, there's another group of bad guys. They look like giant space rhinoceroses, the Jadoon. That's such a cool frigging name. And they're basically space cops. The Sontarans, aka the potato guys. Like, there's so many fascinating parts of this franchise. And talking about this makes me want to maybe jump back into it. Like, I left about halfway through the Capaldi run. I saw a couple episodes of the Whittaker stuff. I've heard some backlash about the Timeless Child. I know very little about it. I have most of the Doctor Who role-playing game. In fact, to give you a preview of our holiday gift guide, I actually got sent from Cubicle 7, which is the role-playing company that has the license to the role-playing game. There's a Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition conversion for Doctor Who, and I'd be very curious to see how that worked, because their system for Doctor Who is very, very, very interesting, and that's also another reason why I kept engaged with the franchise for so long, because each Doctor would get their own source book. So even if you weren't playing the game, it was this huge encyclopedia of knowledge, and you'd learn things about the adipose, which is like fat, that like me and Alex are fat guys, but it's an alien that is
really
fat.
a villain?
No, they're happy.
But it's so weird because they're so cute.
If you ask some people.
But you also have the autons, the fact that living plastic. That is such a cool idea.
They
you
stem
never
from
think
the
about
nesting consciousness, which is actually an old one of the great old ones. Basically, it's like Lovecraft is a thing in the Doctor Who universe. All the Lovecraft mythos, and that's one of them. I think that's Neri Altharop is the nesting.
Oh, that's awesome! I didn't know that. Like, again, it's a franchise that has so many different layers, that as much as I love Star Trek and Star Wars, I like how Doctor Who takes risks. It challenges what you may think of as a bad guy. I think the Master from the third Doctor run forward is an amazingly bad guy. I love the different
Don't
incarnations.
forget, if you're going to watch some of the Doctor Who stuff, there's also the Sarah Jane Adventures.
Oh, which is
children.
Yes.
Yeah, for kids, yeah.
But it's wow.
Really well done. And then there's like also the darker Torchwood stuff.
There's
I was going to say Torchwood. I loved. Wasn't there the K9 shows as well?
Yeah.
But the Torchwood stuff, I had friends that watched Torchwood and didn't know it was Doctor Who connected, because the way they marketed it up here initially. And I mean, because I just remember people saying to me, "You should check this out. It's like R-rated X-Files, but British." And it was like, okay, watching it, and I was like, wait a minute, this is Doctor Who. and then they had that spin-off, that final season that was produced only in the States, Miracle Day. That was
Miracle
freaky.
Day, yeah.
The idea
that was disturbing.
The concept of, they took that simple concept of what happens if death doesn't exist anymore, and then you don't die, but also what happens to the population, food sort, like it's torture in itself, right? So and of course the casting of that show was really, really good. So there were a lot of space. I wonder if this new Disney deal, where Disney's, I think, fronting at least half of the money for each season moving forward for however long, and getting exclusive streaming rights and They're, I think, filming a lot of it both sides of the pond. I'm wondering if that means we're going to get more spin-offs again. Will we get a revival of Torchwood? Will we get other stuff? I mean, Sarah Jane is not going to come back in that form, obviously, unless they
Disney
do
would not be able to do
Um,
the Torchwood stuff because first thing, it's dealing with
Pretty dark ideas.
some pretty dark ideas, but also
Yeah.
what is gender?
and and that's the thing. They might tackle it. It would, I guess, it would have to depend on how popular Doctor Who gets. If this gives it a full blown revival in popularity in the States, like to full mainstream, maybe they would do it and tackle it under like the Fox banner, because I think they have it as Star or something. Is that's what they're calling their adult section on the streaming platforms, or maybe it would still be separate, or maybe the BBC would handle it or something. But I would like to see more spin-offs. Give me, introduce some interesting characters and give me like their version of, I don't know, Star Trek. Just introduce a bunch of people in the future and then just literally have it be British Star Trek, and just have it be a crew that the Doctor encounters in one episode, and then give us our Star Trek, please.
The Unearthly Child and the Doctor Dances is where you first see John Harkness.
Unearthly Child. It's not. It's Empty Child.
Empty Child. Sorry, Empty.
Unearthly Child
is the first
episode,
episode, and I'm just
It's fine. He would have probably been like 1 or 2 years old.
and you
when
actually
that aired,
see him.
But yeah,
You actually see him as the face of Bo.
Which I thought was such a clever callback.
the face of Bo.
But yeah,
when I saw that, I just remember comments online. And they're like, "Oh, you should see this episode, The Face of Bo," and everybody was just referring to it as, "Oh, it's Joan Rivers in 30 years," and I was like, "That's mean," but funny. But yes, I mean, plot wise here, I know we haven't gone too deep. It's just these are fun movies. They're worth watching. Are they a good entry point if you're not familiar with the series? Maybe not, because there are differences to it. But if you're somebody who's been interested maybe in the early 60s shows, but to be honest, some of those are going to be a hard watch for the younger generations. The early stuff, the black and white stuff, it hasn't been the best kept as far as archival quality for a lot of it. It can look kind of rough. It looks pretty rough until you get to the third or fourth Doctor, right? So, and I mean, even that stuff, there are people that are going to argue, especially people younger than us, that even right up to Sylvester McCoy stuff is rough to watch.
Yeah.
When, if that's the case, maybe your jumping on point should be Tales of the TARDIS, because those are ones that they've tightened up the stories, made them into 1 hour specials or 1.5 hour specials, added some bookends to them. That might be a good entry point, and then jump into these movies and then the rest of the series.
And if you're curious, you can listen to us talk about it on our Earth versus Soup episodes, and we go into real detail on the plot and all the behind the scenes stuff. Yeah.
So yeah, guys, that was our discussion of the two 1960s Doctor Who movies. Definitely worth checking out, and as Alex and Aaron have explained, maybe not the best jumping on point, but definitely something you should probably check out. Definitely a cool side dish to the Doctor Who franchise. So we've got a couple more Future Imperfects in the can before the end of the year. I know we're going to be talking about Star Trek Prodigy before the end of the year, and then I know we'll probably have something during the holiday season for sure. And then we're pretty much going to be off from December 9th forward, but we still have 2 more Twig regular shows. So that's going to be on Monday the 27th and on December 4th. So make sure you're staying tuned for those shows. Plus, we've got the Game Awards coming up, which it's going to be a packed year. This year has really come out swinging. And then we have our annual holiday gift guide, which is me and Alex are almost to the point of telling the FedEx guy, "Oh God, please stop." There's so much stuff at our door this year. So we got a lot of really neat stuff to talk about. Plus me and David Denoyer are going to be talking about some more loose cannons, which you're going to hear during the holiday break. I know me, Ken, and maybe JT might be talking about the Mortal Kombat stuff. We just got to get a date lined up for that. So don't worry, guys. Lots of stuff coming up. But today It's Thanksgiving. It's Doctor Who Day. So please go out, enjoy some turkey. Maybe the doctor will show up in your backyard, and hey, maybe you'll go have a wonderful adventure. So for This Week in Geek from the wonderful land of Kitchener, we have been
Alex, the producer.
And from the land of time and space beyond, known as Lansing, Michigan,
I'm
they
Aaron.
have been.
I'm Darlene.
And I've been Mike the Birdman saying, we'll catch you guys again next time, right here on Future Imperfect, only on thisweekingeek.net.